This is LukePaulson, the Catholic Conservative, and welcome to the news of the week for April 19th, 2025. And if you enjoy these videos, do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. Gabbard starts digging. We all remember the famous photos of conservative influencers who were given Epstein binders to release to their listeners and followers. It was shown then that the contents of the binders were nothing but publicly available data. Naturally, the administration had egg on its face as a result. However, I would like to point out that even though nothing happened, I think that Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, and the rest of President Trump's cabinet are learning something that took President Trump one term and a hiatus to learn. The swamp goes deeper than any of them realized or could even imagine. It is the reason why so many deep state operatives are fighting the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. There is someone on the take everywhere you look. Gabbard wants the files related to the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. to be as detailed as possible. And hopefully the Epstein files are in there as well, but I would not hold my breath. The problem, according to Gabbard, is that a lot of these files have never been scanned or digitized. This means that there are a lot of files that are missing. As such, she created the Directors Initiatives Group, or DIG, to find all of these files, and to increase transparency within the agency. It is not an easy task, but it is what the American people voted for en masse. Speaking of voting, only Americans vote. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or SAVE Act, passed the House of Representatives. As of the writing of this script, it has yet to be approved by the Senate. Naturally, the same party that is unable to say what a woman is has decided that this will make it harder for women to vote. Officially, the reason is that once a woman is married, the names on official records are not always uniform. This is quite frankly a very silly objection. But what would I know? I am just someone who makes online political commentary. This objection is illogical, especially if you read the bill. Something that most of the people in Congress rarely do, by the way. There are protections to ensure that these women can still vote. Even so, it just requires the documents to register to vote, not at the polling location. This means that you can provide a whole file folder full of documents proving who you are. I have no idea how liberals keep finding these doomsday scenarios that do not exist. What the bill does is ensure that only those who are Americans can vote. Now, all of the plane loads that Brandon shipped all over the country in the dead of night cannot vote. So bringing in all of the illegals and having them surge the border is not going to help in the next election. I am just going to bet that half of cackling Kamala's votes in red states came from counties that had these drop-offs. I could not prove it, but it makes sense. Either way, all of those who can legally vote should also be happy with the economy brought on by President Trump. Stock market rebounds. The tariffs instituted by President Trump caused a small downturn in the stock market. Not nearly as bad as the recession under Brandon, because that was so bad that they actually changed the definition of a recession. Now the stock market is back up. However, even if it was not, you and I would still have no need to be concerned. Not only are jobs coming back to America,
Yes!
not only are these companies able to sell to more people,
Yes!
we were also able to see who would work with us and who would not.
Yes!
You do not judge the value of the economy based on how the stock market is doing for a day, or even a week, or even a month. It is but one measure and needs to be judged wisely. And now that the stock market is back up, liberals are upset that things are going well, to the point that President Trump is accused of Nancy Pelosi levels of crime, also known as insider trading, for letting the stock market go back up. In other words, he gets blamed for the stock market going down and attacked for the stock market going back up. Like liberals, China is less than happy that we are doing well. As a result, they are doing something truly evil. China recruits swamp creatures. China is an enemy of America, and there are no two ways about it. They keep their tariffs on American products high, just so that their people stay dependent on President Xi and his ilk. Meanwhile, I am seeing reports that their factories are empty and the machines unused. because they cannot sell to America. The Chinese government created this problem, and now the Chinese people have to suffer. Now we know that, at least according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, China is actively recruiting Americans with expertise in science and technology. They are targeting people who were fired as a result of Doge. Make no mistake, these men and women probably have a lot of classified information in their heads. Furthermore, while the main point of the tariffs was to bring American jobs back, the secondary objective was to ensure our technological power on the world stage. I certainly hope that the FBI and other federal agencies are keeping an eye on these people, and those who are going to China or these other countries may have their passports revoked. Make no mistake, China is pushing for World War III, and that cannot happen. Speaking of international issues, let us go to the ever-corrupt United Nations. UN judges slave. The United Nations, or UN, is not exactly known for respecting human rights. Not only is it a huge money laundering scheme, Elon Musk was asked to make a huge donation when he became one of the richest men on Earth, but the request was turned down when he asked for accountability. Truly, the man was made for Doge. Additionally, they put several countries that have abominable records on human rights on committees about human rights. Now perhaps the UN does some good work every so often.
Why, even a broken clock is right 2 or 3 times a day.
However, it is so infinitely corrupt that it is just not worth it. Now, if the entire agency is corrupt, imagine how corrupt some of the higher-ranking members are. Take Justice Lydia Mugambe of Uganda, for example. She has recently been accused and convicted of having a literal slave. Now, while liberals in America love to bring up slavery that white men fought and died to end, they will ignore present-day slavery across the African continent. So if this person who is judging crimes of people around the world, I would not trust her judgment. And the thought that she might have been on American soil is just sickening. The fact remains that this organization, like most government agencies in America, are so abominably wicked that they need to be dismantled and not rebuilt. When you have poison in your food, you do not replace the poison. You just remove the poison. And our lives would operate just fine without Mugambe or anyone from the UN. Now, while some cronies are without hope of coming to the MAGA side, others may have a chance to come to the MAGA side. Look who came to dinner. Bill Maher has very severe Trump derangement syndrome. In fact, he admits that he would rather have a recession that removes President Donald Trump than let him work to make America great again. If you doubt me, here is the receipt.
This economy is going pretty well. We have to, what? Why is that funny?
Hey, it is going well for now.
For now, right. That's my, thank you. That's my question. Is like, I feel like the bottom has to fall out at some point. And by the way, I'm hoping for it because I think one way you get rid of Trump is a crashing economy. Yeah. So please bring on the recession. Yeah. Sorry if that hurts people, but it's either root for a recession or you lose your democracy.
Recently, the comedian, I will not call him an anchor, had dinner with President Trump. This in itself was an anathema to the Democratic Party, who believe that everything that President Trump does is evil. But what is worse is that Mr. Maher had good things to say about President Trump after the fact. This really ignited a firestorm from the left, but that is not to say that they agreed on everything. However, what brought more hatred of Mr. Maher than perhaps anything else was saying that President Trump listened to him. Things are getting very interesting, very fast. Mr. Maher's TDS may flare back up any day now, but let us hope that it is in remission for his followers' sake. Of course, Mr. Maher is not the only one who has met with President Trump lately. The president of El Salvador also met with our president. The president south of the border. President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador came to the White House. Some of these countries emptied their prisons and let these dangerous felons loose in America. I do not know if El Salvador did this, or if President Bukele authorized this, or anything of the like. However, he was willing to meet with our president. Among the things discussed is that he will not deport someone who was mistakenly deported. Both men admitted that he was dangerous and needed to be locked away, one of whom is going to have to deal with him a lot more now. I know absolutely nothing about this case, but I do know one very important thing. If you cry wolf long enough, people will stop believing you. Likewise, if you cry innocent asylum seeker about gang members long enough, people will stop trusting you. These are the same people who think that burning cities and cars is a peaceful method of protest. As such, I do not trust those whom they would call peaceful. Now, a lot of those who are being deported were dangerous gang members. If only this next guy could have been deported. However, Americans cannot be deported, but they can be executed. Another assassination attempt. President Trump has not only survived multiple assassination attempts, but has gotten stronger as a result. Now, another person was making online threats under the alias Mr. Satan against both President Trump and Elon Musk. Andy is from Butler, where the most infamous near-assassination occurred. Combine this with a Wisconsin teen who is charged with killing his own parents so that he could finance his own assassination plot. According to Politico, Biography.com, and Wikipedia, out of the 45 presidents that we have had, 14 have had people try to assassinate them. Only 4 were successful. Most only had 1 failed assassination attempt. But someone tried twice against Gerald Ford, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. However, President Trump has had at least 5 attempts on his life that we know about. There might be a lot more. In fact, there undoubtedly have been many more. Think about it for a moment. No one disagrees that Nazis, or National Socialists, are evil. You take it a step further to punch or kill all of the Nazis whom you see. Then if you define everyone with whom you disagree with as a Nazi, do not be surprised when this happens. Again, these are people who think that burning cities and cars is peaceful. Speaking of children, higher education is poisoning the minds of the next generation. Harvard funding cut. I do not think that I am a radical person. I believe that people should be judged based on their merit rather than their melanin. I believe that people should not support terrorist organizations. I believe that there should be oversight for federal funds rather than blank checks. Harvard agrees with none of these. After refusing to deal with their Hamas problem during the Biden administration, President Trump gave them an ultimatum. Stop racist DEI policies as well as their support for Hamas, or have their funding cut. Naturally, Harvard chose not to stop their racism and continues to support terrorists, and thus their funding was cut. Why are either of these so important to Harvard?
Only Poppins would know.
Combine this with their massive endowment from super wealthy people, and the fact that according to Mike Benz, they allegedly worked with George Soros and USAID for regime changes. That is a good reason for funding to be cut. No private school should be getting special federal funding. Granted, I am not sure why schools are getting any federal funding whatsoever. I guess that is why I'm considered radical by leftists and rhinos. Now that I have talked about all of that heavy news, I want to end this week with some really good news. He is home. When I am editing these videos over the course of the week, I have to choose which stories I cover and which I ignore. I could have chosen the women of Blue Origin.
And then next will be the main parachutes that get pulled out.
That's screaming inside the capsule.
And all 3 parachutes reefing and...
I could talk about the mutated wolf that is falsely called a dire wolf. However, I want to talk about Josh Sullivan. A native of Tennessee, he went to South Africa to spread the gospel. However, while there, he was kidnapped by anti-Christian terrorists. I say this because it was not about money. After all, they reportedly did not ask for ransom money. However, he has been released after a deadly shootout with police. Maybe he was going to a dangerous place, but they told St. Paul the same thing when he said that he was going to Rome. Either way, God protected Pastor Sullivan so that no weapon formed against him prospered. And Pastor Sullivan is still preaching the word. Maybe I'm just blowing smoke. Maybe I'm completely off my rocker, but that is just my opinion. And do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. But before you go, on the left I have last week's video, but you may also enjoy the video on the right.